Welcome to another episode of Jews in the World. I'm Phyllis Miller, and I have a guest today that I'm very excited to talk to. Michael Mail is in the UK. He is the founder of the Foundation for Jewish Heritage. And I'm going to let him tell you what this foundation is that he started in 2015. And then we're going to talk about some of the fascinating buildings and monuments that the organization works to preserve, and he'll explain his picture behind him. Go ahead, Michael, take it away.
Okay, that's great. Well, Phyllis, can I say thank you for inviting me to
Yes.
join you? I'm delighted. Despite the time differences, we've been able to meet up. So my name is Michael Mail, as Phyllis said. I grew up in Glasgow, Scotland, in the small and perfectly formed Jewish community there. And since 2015, I've been the chief executive of the Foundation for Jewish Heritage. We launched it in 2015. And the role of the foundation is to work internationally on the preservation of Jewish-built heritage, Jewish buildings. Our focus has been on the synagogues of Europe. Europe has the largest number of Jewish heritage sites, and synagogues are the most iconic and beautiful buildings of the Jewish community. There are some stunning buildings across the continent of Europe, many hundreds of years old, sometimes even older. And many are today, sadly, without communities. And we know that, the story of the 20th century is essentially one of Jewish migration, expulsion, or Holocaust, which meant that a community that at the beginning of the 20th century, 9 out of 10 Jewish people lived in Europe. Today, it is 1 out of 10. And we mapped all the historic synagogues of Europe as one of the first undertakings of the foundation. This is a publicly available website. I recommend your listeners to go along to it. It's www.historicsynagogueseurope.org, and maybe that's something afterwards, Phyllis, you could share.
Yes.
And we did this in collaboration with the Center for Jewish Art at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. And we mapped all these synagogues, all the historic synagogues of Europe. There are 3,347 of them. And we rated them all according to their significance, how important they are, and their condition. What state are they in? And the reason why we did this was that we wanted to identify the most important synagogues most in danger, and that this would give us an agenda. We wanted to be proactive in thinking about what sort of synagogues we would work with in trying to secure their preservation. And the research was very interesting and very useful for lots of ways. In lots of ways, it had never been done before. It was unprecedented.
Wait, that's what I want to what I want to know.
Yeah.
Why was this only started in 2015? Why did no one get behind this project, after the Holocaust?
You know what, Phyllis? This is one of the big mysteries, and it's one of the things that, baffled me. What happened is, I've had a career working in the Jewish community in London, and I've always had a passion for history. History was my favorite subject at school, and I had the opportunity of studying Jewish history both at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. I spent a year there, and I also did a master's at Brandeis University in Boston. It was the Hornstein program, which is a program in training in Jewish communal service. And in both locations, for the very first time, I had the opportunity of studying Jewish history, which of course is extraordinary, remarkable, tragic. And what happened was kind of in the sort of, at about 10 years ago, I was actually working for the British Friends of the Hebrew University, but I'd also got involved voluntarily with a heritage organization. It's called ICOMOS. I won't go into exactly what it's about, but it's looking at the state of heritage across the globe. It's actually an organization that exists in many countries. ICOMOS stands for the International Council on Monuments and Sites.
Got it.
And I became a UK trustee. And there was a gentleman, Graham Bell, up in Newcastle, who was working in Hungary. And he was working on a synagogue. And he said to me, who should I speak to in the Jewish world on this? And I said, I assumed that in New York or Jerusalem. They would be an organization working internationally on preserving Jewish heritage. So I said to Graham, let me Google and find out. And to my shock and surprise, I discovered that such an organization did not exist. I found this incredible. Now, there are individual initiatives in different places, but no one was looking at this comprehensively or strategically. And as you said, Phyllis, given the history of the Jewish people in the 20th century, what happened? The disappearance of the Jewish community in what were the heartlands of the Jewish people, and that's, as we know, Warsaw, Vilna, Vilnius, but also in the Arab world, Baghdad, with its extraordinary story of the Babylonian Jewish community, 2,600 years old. A third of Baghdad was Jewish at the turn of the 20th century. Today, there are 5 Jews in Baghdad staying very quiet. One synagogue, the Meir Twig. But, just given what happened to the Jewish people in the 20th century, one would have imagined, that this would have been addressed, because so many buildings became orphans. And we know under communism in Eastern Europe, it became very difficult to address this subject. But post-communism, we then had opportunities to re-engage. And there have been some important champions of the cause of Jewish heritage, but no one had kind of tackled it systematically. And, the danger was that you'd have a bunch of volunteers in a town in Poland tackling one particular synagogue in one place. 5 miles down the road, you may have a more important building, but because there's no particular local campaign there, it's simply being ignored. So this was why we wanted to bring this comprehensive approach. And that was why we began with this crucial piece of research to enable us to properly identify, what's out there, what state are these buildings in. And from that, we were able to take on working on a number of priority projects across Europe. And obviously, Phyllis, I can then tell you about some of them.
Yeah, I'm going to have you, but I want to just interject for a minute. As you talk, I realized that my husband and I took on this in a very small way. We were stationed in Munich with the U.S. Army. He was an Army officer from September 70 to May 72. And now this is before the internet, everyone who doesn't remember this. And we, as American Jews, we wanted to see remnants of Jewish history in Europe. And we had a really hard time finding it. And my husband did a photo essay. So, it's just, when I think back, I think, and why didn't we think, how come there's no organization? Just didn't occur to us. We just tried to do it on our own.
I remember, I've got a number of distinguished trustees on our board. So I've got Sir Simon Schama and Simon Sebag Montefiore, who in the UK are 2 leading television historians. I've got Lord Danny Finkelstein. I met with Lord Finkelstein in the House of Lords, and he listened to me patiently. And at the end of it, he said, I have never thought about this. What happened to the physical heritage of all these Jewish communities across Europe? What happened? And you're absolutely right. We should be thinking about this. We should be engaged in this. And, he very kindly joined our board as a result. But, you're absolutely right, Phyllis. For some reason, it's simply not been on the radar. It's been a kind of Cinderella subject. And I mean, one theory, a couple of theories on this. Somebody said, well, the Jewish people, we're used to moving. We don't get too invested in our synagogue buildings. We have to pack our bags and move on. That was one theory. The other theory is trauma. I did get one reaction from a couple of philanthropists in the UK who would sort of say to me, well, look, do you think I should be concerned about a synagogue in Ukraine where all my people were murdered? We don't bring me back there. We left, we built synagogues where we live now. Of course, we challenge that. We think it's wrong because we're losing history. These are vital testimony to the Jewish experience in those places.
Before, so very important. Maybe we should repeat it again.
Yeah.
We all need to understand this rich centuries and centuries of history before the Holocaust.
Yes.
As my younger daughter, both my daughters went to the Jewish day school through, until college. but the other one said, why do we only study in Jewish history the Holocaust? There's so much more Jewish history. And that's what you're doing. It's not just the
Absolutely.
building. The building is connected to the history. So first tell people what that beautiful picture is behind you.
Yes, so this is a stunning synagogue it's called Casala Monferrato. It's in a place called Casala Monferrato, which is in the Piemonte region of Italy. So it's very close to Turin. And you've got these gorgeous Baroque synagogues. And what's kind of fascinating is from the outside, you will be walking down a nondescript street with a very plain door. You walk through the door, you walk upstairs, and you walk into this. It's that classic thing of, from the outside keeping a low profile, and then when you come in, you're then the glory of these stunning synagogues. And can I say, Phyllis? I mean, you're absolutely right what you're saying about, that this kind of we're engaging with the story of the Jewish people, right? And if you want to know who we are today, well, yeah, absolutely. We're surrounded by history. We're products of history in all sorts of ways. And if you want to know where we are today, we need to know our past. Winston Churchill once said, if you don't know your past, you will not have a future. So it's so important that we know where we came from, who we are, and this points to where we are going. So it informs the Jewish people, but it's also important that wider society knows about this remarkable Jewish life and contribution. The Jews were central to Western civilization. They were
Yes.
critical. I mean, from when you think of all the ways that the Jews have contributed to each of the countries in which we've lived in, and you've got these towns and villages in Eastern Europe that were built by Jews that had Jewish majorities. These were huge parts of society, and it's important that we understand that. I had a lovely. I was visiting a Polish town, Dąbrowa Tarnowska, and we were being taken around by a group of 16-year-olds who were doing a project on the Jewish community, the lost Jewish community of their town. The community was extinguished in the Holocaust. And I said to her as I was walking with her, I said, look, what would you say to people who will say to you, look, why are you doing this? There's no Jews here anymore. What's the point? What's the purpose? And she simply replied, she said, it's the history of our town. And I thought, well,
Exactly.
that's a good answer. So if you want to know about where you live, well, you need to know about the Jewish community. And I think there's also, I mean, we know this is a very difficult time for the Jewish people with everything that's going on. And I think there is something also about, I often think of these synagogues as little embassies of the Jewish people. They can have an impact today. They
Yes.
can have impact, in terms of building understanding, empathy, combating ignorance, prejudice, anti-Semitism. Jews were local, Jews were neighbors. The power of these buildings is that, they're indigenous. These are places that people walk past every day. They know this is a local story. And often these synagogues are the last physical evidence and testimony to the Jewish life that was. And they can serve a very important contemporary purpose as profound places of education about the Jewish life and contribution.
Exactly. Again, what you just said is so very important. It's educating people, particularly in places where there are no longer Jews, of the importance of Jews in their history of their town, their village, and in that way creating empathy that these are not people other who live around
Yeah,
thousands of miles away, but they lived among us. We
that's
need to
right.
honor what they contributed. So tell us now one or two of the projects you think most significant at the moment.
Yes.
And
Okay.
then tell everyone how we can help you preserve these.
Well, I'd be delighted to. Yes. So in terms of our current projects, I mean, I would say generally speaking, we do not seek to own buildings, right? We seek to work with the owners, local volunteers, the municipality to help them think through what can be done with their abandoned synagogue building. And, you know, with the projects that we've currently taken on, we've got a medieval synagogue in Spain in a place called Hijar, if that's Hijar. There are not many synagogues that survive from the medieval period. It's in the Aragon region of Spain, and it survived in being transformed into a church. So for the last 500 years, it served as a church. Today, there are only services 1 day a year because it's not the main church in the town. And the mayor wants to turn the building into a Sephardi heritage center. So it will tell the story of Spanish Jewry, and we are helping the mayor. So we've developed a master plan for the project, and we're working with the mayor and how we take this forward. As you'll appreciate, all these projects are multi-year, many years to get them going. We're also working in a place called Fagarash in the Transylvania region of Romania. And I was actually there last summer. And this is an abandoned synagogue in the town, built in the 1840s. Very interestingly, it's the only synagogue I've come across with a bell tower without a bell.
Without a bell.
Right? So it's a very, very interesting. And what's happened is the municipality has recently taken ownership of the building. They want to turn it into a cultural centre that will serve the local population while also recognising and celebrating the Jewish community that had existed in the town. And again, we're offering our help and support. A classic way that we help is by helping them think through, we talk about running a feasibility study. Looking at the options for the future use of the future use of the site that will be sustainable and financially viable, right? So if we're talking about turning it into a place of education or a cultural venue, what are your audiences? You're talking about engaging schools. Well, are schools interested? What is the curriculum in Romania? How might what we offer in the synagogue tie in with what students are learning in school? So it can be an important resource to the schools, and it can tie in with, it can provide materials and resources for the schools, as well as an important educational visit in coming into a synagogue and seeing for the first time what a synagogue actually looks like. So that's a kind of classic thing that we're doing. We've been working in Izmir in Turkey. In Izmir, there are 9 Sephardi synagogues in the center of town, all of them unused. I mean, it's an extraordinary. Wow. These are synagogues from the 16th, 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries. Gorgeous buildings. The Jewish community, which was very substantial there, declined dramatically. A lot went to Israel post 1948. Today, there are 1,000 Jews living in Izmir, and they're living in the suburbs. So none of these synagogues are being currently used, and there has been a plan driven by the local community, and there's an Israeli foundation called the Kiryati Foundation that we've also been supporting to think through what could be done with these synagogues. And they're talking about creating a kind of Jewish cultural quarter in Izmir that would enable people to visit those synagogues, with the idea of also placing a museum at the heart of these 9 synagogues that will tell the story of the Jews of Izmir and this classic, the Sephardi Jews who were taken in post 1492 and were settled in the Ottoman Empire. And so it's a story of rescue, of coexistence. It's a positive story. We're also working in Poland. We've been supporting.
Wait, I wanted to ask you a question.
Yeah, sure.
Is I just finished a course on Jewish heritage through Central European University remotely. And one of the other students was from Izmir. So, and there's a big discussion about what is an appropriate use of an abandoned synagogue. Yes. So would all 9 synagogues under this plan be like you'd visit one and learn one part of the history, kind of like Prague, where you visit all these synagogues in the Jewish quarter? Would that be the idea?
Yes, I mean, that's essentially it. I mean, we're talking about opening them as kind of like museums, as you say, like Prague, like Venice. Also, actually in Amsterdam, they use the term Jewish Cultural Quarter, and there's several synagogues with a museum. It is that idea. And I should tell you that, from our point of view, we are interested in repurposing synagogues to serve educational purposes and that will tell the Jewish story. We are reluctant. Obviously, there are other contexts and other types of adaptations that have taken place in the past or are taking place today, if they don't have a Jewish purpose, we are less inclined, shall we say, to get involved. So we've been working on a number of synagogues in Europe, but I would say that our flagship project is a synagogue that we actually purchased, which was unusual for us, and it's in Wales. It's in a place called Merthyr Tydfil, which in the 19th century was the largest town in Wales. And it's the story of the Industrial Revolution. Merthyr Tydfil was at the center of the Industrial Revolution. Iron, steel, coal. A little village was transformed into a major town, and it attracted all sorts of migrants to Merthyr, including Jews. And there's been a Jewish community, a formal Jewish community, since the early 19th century. And the synagogue that they built in the 1870s is it's a stunning building. I recommend all our listeners to look up Merthyr Tydfil Synagogue because it's completely unique.
Well, I will put it how to spell it, etc., in the
Yes.
notes because I have no idea how to spell it. Go ahead.
Yes. Well, it's a very unusual building. It's like a castle. It's built like a castle, and it's at the top of a hill. And there was an active community until 1983. It then closed. It was turned into a church and then a gym. It's been empty since 2006. Its condition is deteriorating. It was identified through the research that we undertook to being an important building in danger. You know, there was a hole in the roof. It was in very poor condition. And we had a vision for what this building could be, which was to create a Welsh Jewish Heritage Centre. So there's a very interesting story of the Welsh Jewish community. It's over 250 years old. Like everywhere, Jewish communities always have interesting stories, interesting characters. And we thought that, you know, the Jewish community is declining. Now, essentially, it's in Cardiff. There's Jews in different places, but it's the strongest community and the most viable community today is in Cardiff. And we were thinking, whatever happens to the Welsh Jewish community in the future, in 10, 20, 30 years' time, there will be one place that will tell its story. And that story will be in Merthyr Tydfil. It's in Merthyr Tydfil, but it's a national project. It is now a £5 million initiative. We have support from the Welsh Government and also the National Lottery Heritage Fund, which is a major foundation that supports heritage preservation in the UK. Prince Charles, now King Charles III, visited the project in 2021, and the Welsh First Minister visited last summer. So this is a major project. We've got 13 consultants working on it, and this is very much our kind of flagship.
Has there been any pushback from organizations that say, what are you doing? You should be spending your money elsewhere. Or have you basically had favorable reactions to your projects?
Well, I mean, we've been delighted with the level of interest. I mean, it's quite interesting, you know, before we launched the foundation, I spent a lot of time talking to heritage organizations and Jewish common organizations and other interested bodies, just checking, do we agree there is value in creating a foundation for Jewish heritage? And the response was resoundingly positive from everyone. And again, it was that reaction of, you mean there isn't one already? And so yes. And in working on individual projects, I mean, again, if I come back to Wales, look, the building had been a white elephant. It's grade 2 listed. You know, in Britain, we've got a grading system. So it's a national monument. It is listed, which meant that the owner, who was a local Merthyr businessman, his dream would have been to have knocked it down and built a block of flats. He would have built a block of apartments. He wasn't able to. And he tried to see if he could adapt the building. Basically, he could not come up with a solution for the building. It had become a white elephant. He put it up for sale and no one was buying it. So if we had not come along, that building would have just remained in the landscape. And as somebody said to me from the heritage sector, they said, look, this is the sort of building where somebody will break in, there'll be a fire, and the building will be gone. If you don't do anything, it will disappear from the landscape. And of course, we have a general sense, Phyllis, that this project is a race against time. You know, there are
Absolutely.
so many buildings out there in very poor condition. You know, we've got our priority list. We would love to do more, and we hope that as, you know, we grow, and hopefully we will grow and take on more staff, we will be able to achieve more and have a bigger impact. But there is this concern, and there are some gorgeous buildings across Europe and of course in other parts of the world. I mean, you know, we were looking at Jewish heritage in India, extraordinary heritage
Mm.
there. I've been contacted by synagogues in the Caribbean
Mm.
with wonderful, wonderful stories. And
Yes.
Argentina was in touch, and, you know, just great, great stories all over the place. But these buildings are deteriorated. You know, Jews have moved. They've moved out of Eastern Europe. Also, just that move to the suburbs, just, you know, communities that were not affected by the Holocaust, but they've just moved on. They've moved from places, yet they've left behind an astonishing legacy. And we want to preserve that legacy for it to have an impact today. And this comes back to that educational purpose. You know, from the point of view of all our trustees, this is an educational project. We're saving the buildings as a means to an end. And that end is education for the Jewish people and for wider society.
Yeah, I think that's very important. It's not just to save a beautiful building, but to
Yes.
save everything connected to it in terms of its history and the people who found it. And I mean, I just keep chuckling over Wales because, you know, it's like Wales. Okay, got it,
Yes.
got
And
it.
I haven't even told you about the gorgeous Garnet Hill Synagogue in Glasgow, Scotland, which is also a very, you know, lovely, lovely building. Um, and you know, look, there's beautiful heritage and just great stories. And the buildings, you say, the buildings represent the communities. It's the people
Yes,
it's the communities that use the buildings, and it's telling the story of the communities. Through the buildings, you get to the people and you get to the stories. Then you know, they tell the stories of the people, and the buildings are stories. You know, that's what they represent, and we want to tell the stories of these buildings.
so how can our listeners, my listeners, help you with this project?
Yes, well, we have created an American Friends. We have a 501c3, the American Friends of the Foundation for Jewish Heritage. We have created a Canadian Friends. We've got a bunch of lovely volunteers in Toronto who were delighted when they heard about our existence and wanted to take part. So we have created the opportunity for people to participate. The obvious answer is, of course, philanthropically, financially. You know, we have our website. People can donate online, either directly to the foundation or through the American Friends or the Canadian Friends. So financial support would be hugely appreciated. It's a big agenda, but we are making progress and we want to do more. Beyond that, I mean, I am interested in hearing from people who are working on projects. You know, we want to be a supportive address that people can turn to, and we're very happy to share our experiences. And I should tell you that we're actually currently working on this. I recently took on a project officer full time to work with me, and we want to develop resources that can be useful for people across the globe who are dealing with preserving Jewish heritage sites. So we want to be an address that people, you know, can turn to. And if there's people out there who might be interested in volunteering in the context of maybe getting involved with projects, you know, with all our projects, we've got volunteer committees that are running these projects. With the project in Merthyr Tydfil, we have a steering committee, we have working groups looking at different aspects, you know, educational work, building side of things, the business planning side of things. So, you know, we are interested in volunteers who might be interested in getting involved in specific projects, but certainly an easy way of immediately supporting us is through financial support, and we would be hugely grateful for any assistance in that respect.
And people who want to work volunteer, besides donating through your site, can they contact you through the
Yes,
site?
that's right.
Right.
So the email is on the website. I mean, it's also, Phyllis, you can put it in the chat. You know, I
Yes.
mean, I can tell you.
No, we'll put
Yes.
it at the description.
Yeah.
And we hope that people will share this particular episode a lot because I really, really think it's so important. I will just say one of the slides that we saw in the Jewish Heritage class was a public swimming pool being used in a synagogue. And
That's
these
in
are the,
Poznan. That's in Poznan in Poland. They turned the synagogue into a swimming pool.
oh, okay, see, he knows. I could not remember everything that I learned in this class. But as I said, I just don't understand why it wasn't done before. Again, it's not about the buildings as such, it is about the history behind the buildings. Even though, as you see, the one behind Michael is just incredibly beautiful. And when we lived in Europe, my husband and I did discover that a lot of them were kind of hidden in places. We have a story. We tried to find a new synagogue in Madrid in 1972. It was hidden in an alley. I mean, it was just so hard for us as Americans to understand that it couldn't be out there in the open. And yet, in Eastern Europe, when we were in Prague, those synagogues are right there in the open. So it's such an interesting
And
historical
can,
different, right?
and yeah, and I'll tell you something about that, Phyllis, as well, that I often think about. So many synagogues, you're absolutely right, that in Eastern Europe, some of them, are prominent. They're in the city center. And of course, these were towns and villages. Often, the Jewish community might be 40%, 50%, 60%. The Jews were obviously very present in those places. And you know what it got me thinking about? It got me thinking about the optimism of these people to build buildings like that. You were optimistic and you were looking forward and you were making a statement about the Jewish community. And again, in saving these buildings, I kind of feel not only are we honoring those people, but we're also saying something about that feeling that they had,
Yeah.
of a better future, right?
The
And
Neue Synagogue in Berlin,
yeah,
that my daughter and I attended services in 2016. Yes, the Jews had thought they had become an important part of society and that they could build this big synagogue. And then look what happened. So we need to honor that kind of belief in being part of society.
yes, and also I kind of think, and also I think it's a Jewish attitude, which is to be optimistic, even although there are dark times, and obviously we know today is a very difficult time. Fundamentally, to remain optimistic and positive about the contribution that we can all make, to make the world a better place. And I think that was the story of these buildings. Many of these buildings, just a sense of huge optimism. And I think, you know what, we can remain optimistic. We can remain optimistic. And these buildings don't need to be grim reminders. I mean, what you were saying, Phyllis, about, the focus so much on the Holocaust. Chief Rabbi Michael Sudrich of Poland, he once said, it's a tragedy that we look at 1,000 years of Polish Jewish history through the prism of Auschwitz. There is so much more to be said, right, about this community, right? And there was times of, times when life was just normal and people were fine and just getting on with their lives. And we need to remember that there wasn't all grim. And also, Jews were part of society. They were making their contribution. There were people who recognized that. And those stories should also be told.
And women should be included in those stories, not just men. That's my Jewish feminist streak, just saying that we need to, when we tell these stories, to try and represent the whole community and not just one famous person in that town, but really the community as individuals. And that's what your projects enable us to do, is to come into those stories and learn about the individuals.
No, that's right. And no, I think you're absolutely right, because the danger is that, I remember somebody was saying this about, Poland in the 1920s, they weren't all ultra-Orthodox Jews and black hats and peyot,
Exactly.
you had, Zionists, socialists, you had
Exactly.
secularists, etc. And the danger is you fall into these stereotypes of what the Jews were. And I think you're absolutely right. It's important to tell individual stories. And as we know, within the Jewish experience, we have every type of story. And to represent the huge diversity within Jewish life, I think is also important. There's just such a richness of stories, and the danger is that we lose these stories. And in saving the buildings, we provide a kind of locus for telling those stories. You know, there's a base, there's a physical
There's a
presence.
there.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly it.
So I encourage everyone to learn more about the Foundation for Jewish Heritage, to tell your friends, to support it. And Michael, this has just been a delightful talk. I thank you so much. And I just wish you so much success in
No,
preserving Jewish history through Jewish buildings. Thank you.
no.